All right, guys, I promised you a full Flash spoiler review, and you're going to want to stick around to the end because I am going to talk about what this means for the DCU going forward, as this movie is not the big reset that the studio said, and I'm going to explain the possible ways in which they could go into the DCU from this film, and I'm going to talk about how this does set the current DCU in stone and does not erase it the way everybody says it does. All right, I already recorded this once, but dang it, I didn't have my microphone on. So now I get to do it all over again, which does mean I'll be able to do a better job for you guys. All right, so this movie starts out, and the beginning is one of my favorite parts. It starts out with Barry in Central City, and he's at a sandwich shop getting a sandwich first thing in the morning. He's got this court thing he's got to go to. When he gets, there's nothing but jokes in this first scene, by the way. He meets this guy at the deli who's not his normal person, and there's usually a girl there, and nothing but jokes ensue. Barry then ends up getting a call from Alfred, and it was great to see Jeremy Irons back as Alfred. You feel like this is an actual DC Universe film. It was good. Says that Batman needs his help. And he's like, I'm busy. Can't you get somebody else? And he's like, I already tried Superman. I already tried Wonder Woman. They couldn't come. And this is where you see the back of Superman trying to stop a volcano. And that's what Barry's like, how many people did you try before you got to me? And he ends up having to change into the Flash. And this is where we see the new suit. He goes out on the street, and he's about to head out to Gotham City. And that's when he asks his girl for a candy bar because he needs carbs. And he then shoots off to Gotham City. And that whole scene is goofy, by the way. Now, this is the one part that I really liked, is him running from Central City all the way to Gotham City. I thought it looked cool, but they played rock music, and I didn't like that. So he gets to Gotham City in front of this hospital, and the ground is breaking. It's mass chaos, and he has to save some babies. Some babies fall out of this building that's collapsing, and this turns into a whole Looney Tunes segment. Like, he does this thing where he's like, woo, woo! And he gets up there, and he's hopping and skipping and doing all kinds of goofy things. He's got to shove his mouth full of food because his watch is telling him he's low on carbs. The whole thing is goofy. In the meantime, he had a conversation with Batman, and what's interesting is in this, Batman was not using a modulated voice from Alfred. He was just lowering his voice to go down here to talk like Batman. And so it didn't sound like the modulated voice from Batman versus Superman or from Man of Steel, not Man of Steel, but Zack Snyder's Justice League. It was not modulated. It was just him with a deeper voice. So he has this conversation with Batman. Batman then goes to get these people who are trying to steal this device. There were some cool scenes in this. We get to see Batfleck on the Batcycle. He ends up being pulled behind this armored vehicle off of the bike, and he's sliding. And the CGI was wonky. It was very odd, somewhat cool, but very odd. He gets inside the actual vehicle, and he's trying to not kill these people, but punch them out. The driver sees Batman and then jumps out another silly thing by himself. And that's when it careens off the side of the building. And I'll talk about the end of that scene here in a minute, but then it goes back to where Barry's trying to save these babies, and he ends up getting them all lined up so that he can grab them one by one and put them on a gurney down on the ground. He saves the nurse. One of the babies had to be put in a microwave. And so after he saves everybody, there's a microwave sitting there too. And the nurse is like, what the hell just happened? And he pulls the baby out of the microwave, and she screams. And, it's just nothing but jokes. It's nothing but jokes. So the Flash zooms over to where Batman had fallen off of this bridge. They're about to go into the water. There's a briefcase with this stuff that can contaminate and kill a bunch of people. And Batman's, shoots his gun up, tries to save them, but he's losing his grip. When all of a sudden Wonder Woman shows up, uses the lasso to pull him up. He's got the lasso around his hand, and nothing but jokes ensue. Batman's like, oh, I can't say thank you because of my ego. I'm terrible as Batman. I should just use my money to stop. It'd be better if I just gave all my money away to stop hunger. And the Flash comes over, touches it, and says, I know what sex is, but I've never experienced it. And nothing but jokes. It was poorly executed. It sounded ridiculous. It's not the last scene I wanted to see with Batman, Ben Affleck as Batman. It's at that point later where then Barry goes to this court hearing where he was trying to save his dad, exonerate his dad from killing his mom. And the last hope he had was some footage that Bruce had used some new technology to clean it up, but you never see Barry's dad's face, so he doesn't become exonerated. Outside the courthouse, prior to that scene, he's trying to work his way up as a technician, as a criminology. He's, studying in that. Encounters Iris West. She talks about, possibly meeting him a couple years earlier, which is a reference back to Zack Snyder's Justice League. And he's like, no, we haven't seen each other since college. They talk. She wants to get some stuff about his dad not being able to be exonerated. And Barry then, after that, after the court thing and his dad doesn't get exonerated, he starts thinking about his mom, has a flashback. There's a flashback sequence of him, He actually travels to his childhood home and is outside, is reminiscing about his childhood. You get to see him with his mom in her prime and his dad and everything, and they run us through what had happened. And it's at that stage where he gets upset and he travels through the Speed Force and realizes he can actually travel back in time pretty far. So he goes back to when he was saving the babies at that event with Bruce. And he pokes his head through and is like, holy crap, I went back pretty far. And he sees this figure in the Speed Force, way in the distance. It's kind of looking at him. And he's like, what the heck? But then he comes out of it. Doesn't even question it. This was a weird thing in the film. He doesn't question it at all. So he goes back and has this conversation with Bruce saying, I can go back and I can save my mom. I can make sure that she gets the tomatoes she needs. I can go back and save your parents. And Bruce is like, no. Those things make us who we are. You can't do that because there's the butterfly effect. And he proceeds to tell him, if you step on one blade of grass the wrong way or do this, it's going to change everything. Later that night, Iris comes over to catch up with Barry, just wants to talk to him. And that's what Barry realizes, I don't have to have interaction with anything. He starts thinking, I can go back and put an extra can of tomatoes in the basket when she was at the grocery store so that Dad doesn't have to go get any. So this is when he leaves and he travels back. And he goes back pretty far. And you see all these different things, and he travels back. And he does. He's able to get that tomato, to the it's not tomato sauce, it's the canned tomatoes into the basket. And he starts to travel back to our time period, the current time period. But is bumped out of the Speed Force by that dark character again and gets knocked out into the middle of the street close to his house. And again, it's weird because he doesn't even say, who the hell was that? What the hell is going on? There's none of that. It's like he's not even concerned about this other character at all, which was weird. Weird. But it's at that point where he goes into the house and ends up having to steal some clothes because he's in the Flash suit and doesn't have any other clothes. He has to steal some clothes from a woman walking down the street and shows up at his parents' house and realizes that he's not all the way back home, but he's having a conversation with his parents. And then that timeline's Barry is in the background. He notices he's a younger Barry, looks like college age, in the background and coming into the house. And he's like, oh, crap. So he goes outside, and this is where nothing but the next 30 minutes of this movie is nothing other than jokes between him and this other Barry. It's ridiculous. It's just nothing other than comedy. During this sequence, though, you find out later that day that this is the day where the Flash is supposed to get his powers. And Barry realizes if this Flash doesn't get his powers, then he can't get nothing. He could actually disappear from the timeline altogether. And he doesn't want that to happen. And so he takes this current Barry to where he gets his powers. And again, more hilarity ensues. Sets him up to get electrocuted. The electricity goes through his body, goes into the younger Barry, and basically it transfers the power. So our timeline Barry loses his powers, and this other Barry gets his powers, and our timeline's Barry loses his tooth. It's at that stage where he goes back and he's upset, and he's like, I got to get my powers back, otherwise I can't get home. But then there's this thing on the screen that shows that Zod is there. It's the time of, Man of Steel, and Zod is there to find somebody that the government is holding, and he needs to get to this person, and that's when Barry's like, oh crap, we've got to assemble the Justice League to go fight Zod. And he finds out the Justice League doesn't exist. There's no Aquaman. There's no Wonder Woman. Superman is nowhere to be found. The one character that does exist is Batman. In fact, they end up while he's doing this research, he's in the college dorm of this timeline's Barry, not our timeline, but the younger Barry. And his roommates are there, and while they're doing all of this research, and he's like, they start talking, and you find out that Barry realizes this isn't even his timeline. It's not even his past timeline, that he's in some weird alternate timeline. Because you find out that Michael J. Fox was not the person in Back to the Future. It was actually Eric Stoltz, and he's like, man, I've really messed things up. But he's like, we need to go find this timeline's Batman so we can go and stop Zod. He tells the roommates that, you know, they've got to go to like an uncle's dinner. And they go to find Bruce. When they go to his Wayne Manor, and they're able to get inside. And this is where you meet Michael Keaton's Batman. But he's not Batman, he's Bruce Wayne. They end up in the kitchen and they're talking together because they're looking for Bruce. And Bruce comes out and is walking across the table with only one flip-flop. He's got a robe on, really long hair, beard, everything. You can't see his face. And again, more hilarity ensues as nothing but jokes as he goes to kick our timeline's Barry, and because he has no powers, he gets knocked to the ground, and he starts to throw a couple of things at that timeline's Barry, but he's able to block it because now he has superpowers as well. And that's when he's able to dodge, and Bruce falls to the ground. He gets back up, and you see he kind of turns around, you see his face, and it's Michael Keaton's version of Bruce, but he's old, and he's got, you know, long hair. And they sit down to have dinner, and the two Barry, our timeline's Barry explains to him what had happened. And so Bruce starts to explain to him that there are different timelines in the multiverse. And he goes, Barry's like, I don't understand. He goes, I went back to fix it, started to come back, but I'm in an alternate timeline, not my past, but an alternate past. And he's like, yeah, because nothing is linear. He goes, you got two pieces of, you know, spaghetti when they're hard could cross, but if they break and one fuses into the other, you could be on an alternate timeline. And he then cooks a thing of spaghetti, throws it into a plate, and he goes, then you've got a hot mess because you have all these timelines that might be real close together, but they can also kind of go off into their own direction. They can be almost identical, but also branch off into another direction. And that's when Barry says, you know, I need your help to stop Zod. Bruce is like, you know, I fixed crime. I haven't been Batman in 10 years. Gotham is one of the safest places. I'm retired. I'm not getting involved with this. So that's when our Barry and the younger Barry leave, and Barry's like, fine, if he's not going to help, I'm going to use his crap. So he goes to the Bat Cave, and this is where we see, you know, Michael Keaton's Bat Cave, the car, all the tech, and so it's at that point where Barry is looking to find remnants or proof of Superman. They need to find Superman to be able to go stop Zod. That's when he has a conversation over the comms with that Bruce, you know, Michael Keaton's Bruce, and he's like, they have this conversation, and he's like, you know, it's weird how you had an Alfred, I have an Alfred. This is Barry saying this. He goes, you talked about the timelines and things being the same. I had an Alfred, you had an Alfred. There's all these things that are intersecting, and he goes, we need to find this timeline's Superman. So Barry does locate him being held by the government like in Russia. And that's when Bruce comes out of retirement, becomes Batman, and says, I'm going to go help you find this character, but then I'm done. We get to see, you know, the Batwing, which is awesome. The next part of this movie is amazing. It's the best part of the film. They go to Russia to break out Superman, and it's not Superman, it's actually Supergirl. And there's a sequence during here where we get to see this current Batman do some pretty cool stuff. Very reminiscent of what Ben Affleck did in Batman vs. Superman during that warehouse scene, but it's not as visceral, but it's still pretty cool. Probably the second best Batman scene filmed. But at the end, they end up getting to the surface with this girl, and she's just like Superman needs a son. And they're surrounded by a bunch of, probably a dozen or so Russian soldiers. She gets her powers back, saves them all, kills all these people. And I have yet to see anybody complain. Everybody complained, and you'll see people online complain about how Superman had to break Zod's neck. But they're not complaining about Supergirl killing all of these Russians. It's double standards all over the place. But anyway, they take her. She collapses after she saves everybody. They take her back to the Bat Cave. She ends up has a conversation with the Barrys about everything that's going on. And she decides to go check out Zod. So she gets her suit back. She goes to check out Zod. In the meantime, Our Barry, doesn't have his powers, and he enlists the help of Batman to get his powers back by electrocuting him with some chemicals. That doesn't work, okay? And in the meantime, this Supergirl goes and sees that Zod's up to no good and comes back to decide to help them stop Zod. When she gets back, Barry's electrocuted and doesn't have his powers back, so she takes him up into the sky to be electrocuted by natural lightning, and he gets his powers back. So they put a little team together to go stop Zod. And this is another joke. There's another joke in this scene where the younger Barry has to get a suit, and he ends up using an old bat suit from Michael Keaton and cuts off the ears and his arm. It's goofy. Again, nothing but comedy in this movie. And that leads us to the third act of the film, which is just thrown together, happens too fast, and is just a mess. The CGI's a mess. Everything's a mess. But they go to try to stop Zod. And what you find out is that these two Barrys can't fix it. And that this universe is meant to die. Supergirl dies. Batman dies. They both travel back a little bit of time to try and stop it. They try to fix it again. It doesn't work. They try to go back again. And that's when Barry all of a sudden realizes, oh my gosh, I'm not meant to fix this. This is one of those intersecting points where this world is doomed. No matter what timeline we go to, this timeline is toast. And he tries to tell this Barry, look, we need to stop. I actually need to go back and stop my mom from getting the tomatoes to fix everything. And this Barry's like, no, I'll figure it out. So he keeps trying to do it on his own. And every time he comes back, he's in worse shape. And you realize that this Barry is becoming that dark figure that has knocked Barry out of the timeline and that he saw earlier in the film. But it's all thrown together so quick that it doesn't feel like there's any weight to it. That Dark Flash ends up showing up and tries to stop Barry. And he's like, I'm here to stop you from ever having this happen again. You destroy everything. And he's about to kill our Barry when the younger Barry steps in front of him, and the Dark Flash ends up killing that younger Barry. And because of that, the Dark Flash can never exist, and he just disintegrates. It's just stupid. The cheapest way out. And that's when Barry's like, yeah, I got to fix everything. So he goes back, and while he's going back, prior to this happening, all these worlds were colliding. And this is when he decides to go back, and this is where we see all those montages of all the characters. And you see Christopher Reeve's Superman along with Helen Slater's Supergirl together, but they don't look like them. It's CGI'd. You see the what's his name, who was going to play Superman back in the 90s with Superman Lives. You get to see his was the biggest cameo. You get to see him fighting that spider. It was probably a 30-second cameo. You see the 66 Batman, I believe. You see the George Reeves Superman in black and white. You see all these different timelines. You actually see Zack Snyder's Justice League. You see, Aquaman pointing at Flash, when he had knocked him down. You get to see a shirtless Henry Cavill. So you get to see all these things, and they kind of fix themselves, and he travels back. And he has this moment with his mom. He decides to take the tomatoes out, puts them back, and he has a moment with his mom. He ends up seeing her as an adult. It's a very touching moment. This was probably the second best scene in the whole film. It was really well done, and realizes he's not going to be able to save his mom. But he actually has an idea to where he can stop this from ever happening, his mom from ever getting killed. Or not his mom. Well, yeah, his mom from ever getting killed. Well, and this is where this gets weird, okay? She is going to die. He realizes she has to die, but he can keep his dad from going to prison without ever interfering with anything, simply by moving the tomatoes from the lower shelf to the top shelf so that camera can catch his face. So he comes back to what he thinks is our timeline, saves his dad, is exonerated from the new technology from Wayne. They get his face, and his dad is exonerated. And as he's coming out of the courthouse, Bruce calls him on the phone. He's like, Bruce, it's great to talk to you. I can't wait to tell you everything that happened. He goes, I tried to fix everything, realized I couldn't. I can't wait to talk to you. So the car drives up. Bruce gets out of the car, turns around, and it's George Clooney. George Clooney is the Batman of this universe that Barry went to. So Barry realizes he's not back in his universe. And that's when his tooth falls out, and Bruce is telling him, you're acting funny, which is telling us that he probably lost his powers again, but they don't explain how that happened. And the fact that he's not supposed to be there. So he's stuck there, but there's got to be another Barry in that timeline as well. And that's how the movie ends. There's also a post-credit scene where our Barry is talking to that version of Aquaman from that universe, and Aquaman is drunk off his ass and actually ends up in a puddle of water and just kind of lays there. It's a goofy scene. Not the amazing scene that Barbara Muschietti said we were going to get. And then that's the end of the film. So ultimately, this film does not erase the Snyderverse in any way. The Snyderverse is still there. That timeline is still absolutely there, minus Barry. Barry's gone, but everyone else will be there. So if anything, this sets everything in stone. What this does is it displaces Barry, but it doesn't explain how Gunn's DCU starts. Now, Gunn has said that Blue Beetle is going to be the first official character of the DCU. But the first official DCU movie is actually Superman Legacy, but there are 2 projects coming out prior to Superman Legacy. The first is going to be Aquaman 2. So is that Aquaman going to be the Aquaman of this universe, the one that Barry? So that means Barry could be in that movie as well. They could connect it. Or that could be the old DCU Barry, minus Barry being in the movie. They may talk about how Barry disappeared. Who knows? But then you have Creature Commandos. So Creature Commandos could be the TV show that kicks off all the DCU and explains how everything gets fixed. Maybe there's something with that whole unit that kind of explains how things get kicked off. But we don't know. The one thing this movie does not erase the DCEU, and it does not start the DCU. It doesn't start anything. We don't know anything. This movie does not set up anything for the future other than the fact that there is a multiverse out there. But our Barry is missing in action. So we're going to see where they go with this in the future. All right, what did you guys think of this review? I do appreciate all of the support. If you've seen it, what did you think of the movie? We'll definitely be discussing this. It's not having a good opening weekend at all. The 4-day opening weekend looks like it's going to make about $70 million, which is going to be actually less money than what Black Adam made in its opening weekend. Because this is a 4-day holiday weekend where fathers are going to want to go to the movies with their kids and their families. It should be making a lot more than it is. So, yeah, this movie is another box office bomb. It's not going to make its money back. All right, we will see you guys on the next video.